Okay, in this video what we're going to be doing is sort of prepping the input sheet. What we have in front of us right now on the sheet is the trimmed downtown, and I've sort of trimmed it a little bit further, and I've removed the columns really that didn't have much bearing on what we were doing for these videos. What I've also done here is I have sort of randomly generated sort of sectors or blocks within which properties are in, and also randomly distributed specific one-digit values for each of the dimensions of activity, function, structure, site, and ownership. All of these columns right here, randomly generated numbers 1 through 9. For sector, it's just 1 through 4. And these are really the information that you're going to be entering in as a result of your site analysis right here. Right? You have gone out into the field, you've collected this information, and recorded it here. Also, just as a point of clarification, what I've done with this sheet here is that I have frozen the first row and the first column. You'll notice as I scroll up and down, everything that is in the first row is frozen there. And as I scroll from side to side, you'll notice that everything in this first column sticks in place. Basically, that just makes things a little bit easier for me to orient myself. Okay, so what we're going to do here in further prep with the information that we have, one of the good things about Excel is that it allows us to create new information from the information that exists within this spreadsheet right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two columns. And these are two added variables that we're going to generate based on information that we have here. The first, we've gone over this before, is to create a land value or a total value column. And what that is doing is that we are going to be taking either tax land or tax total, and just for the purposes of this, I might want to do both, but for the purposes of this I'm just going to select tax total, and what I want to do is I want to standardize this value. Just to sort of remind everybody, each of these columns right here, the tax value, the tax assessment, is just based on the property itself, specifically with land value, which gets factored into total value, is that a lot of the that value is dependent on the size of the parcel, which really doesn't get to value. So one of the things that we can do with this column right here, this is the area of that shape or that parcel in square feet. And then what we're doing is that we're standardizing the assessed values for the size of the parcel. And so what we're doing basically is canceling out the fact that large parcels, all things considered, are valued at a higher dollar value than smaller parcels. So once we take that out of the equation, we get to sort of a more pure expression of the economic value of a specific piece of land, which could be contingent on things other than the size of the parcel. It could be its location, other sorts of amenities that might be nearby that have some sort of a positive externality that provide extra value for whatever parcel we might happen to be looking at. So this is something that is kind of important for us to do here. So what I'm going to be doing is with this last column that I'm working with, column O, that is going to be where I'm going to be placing my total value variable. And so I will just write in there total value, or maybe just say T underscore value. One of the things I want to be mindful of is that for any of these column headers or these variable names, I want them to be relatively simple, short, and what I don't want is to have a string there. Basically, a group of words, a space, or a group of letters, a space, another group of letters, a space, because QGIS may choke on that. as a field name. So anyways, with total value, to create this and to standardize it by area of the parcel, I'm going to take tax total and I'm going to divide it by the area right here. So with a Excel formula, first thing I want to do is put in the equal sign. That's telling Excel I want you to do an operation of one sort or another on everything that is to the right of this equal sign. And I'm going to click on the first value in the column of tax total. Automatically I see G2. I type in a slash and then I click on this cell, which is the first value. And important here, I want to be sure I'm staying on row 2, is to click on cell H2. That gets reported there. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter, and it does the calculation. You'll notice that when I put the cursor back on O2 right here, and if we look up in the formula bar, we have the contents of that cell. Okay, even though it is sort of returning 14.48902, the actual contents of that cell is this formula right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cursor, place it on the lower right corner of this selected cell. You'll see that little square. As I put the cursor over it, I have sort of a thick plus sign that gets turned into a colored in darker, thinner plus sign. Press my mouse button and I'm going to drag it all the way down to the bottom of this array right here, which is around row 131. Okay, I let go and it copies everything down. And one of the things that I can do is just sort of mess around with the formatting of this cell. It's pretty much contingent upon where this is right now. Anyways, these are dollar figures. It's a dollar value per square foot. So I go to my number formatting and I just format these as dollar values. Okay. The other thing that I want to do is that if you were looking at the town of Boone or the Watauga County GIS for the parcels that you're doing your work for, I think it might be interesting to find out which of those parcels are locally owned and which of them aren't. And one of the things that you could do is kind of scrolling over. What I have here in column D is the tax city and state. Basically, this is the mailing address for the city and state for what is recognized as the owners, right? Who is liable for paying the property tax on this. And so one of the things that I might want to do, just in a very simple manner, to identify those parcels that are owned locally, and if I define Boone, North Carolina as local ownership versus absentee ownership, it makes it pretty easy for me to create a column, right, after the one that I've just created here with tax value, to basically create what we call a dummy variable or a binary variable that's equal either to 1 or 0. It's going to be equal to 1 if it matches the condition that I'm looking for, local ownership or Boone, North Carolina, or it's going to be equal to 0, which is anything other than Boone, North Carolina. And so let me see, I'm just going to call this field or this variable name local. The function that we're going to be typing into this is what's called a logical function, kind of like a if or if else. So if a condition is satisfied, then something is going to be placed here, or something else will. So you get the idea there. So what we're going to be doing, as you might guess, the name of this function is called if. Right? Whether it's a function or a formula, if we're doing these sorts of things, the first thing that we want to do is type in an equal sign. Okay, and then this is an if function, so if a condition exists, right, I type in if, and then open parentheses, and you will notice here it says if, and this logical test is the condition. If that condition is true, right, comma, if that condition is true, I want to put a 1 there, right? my binary variable is going to be equal to 1 if I'm observing what I want to observe. If that condition is false, if there's a failure in that logical test, then I'm going to type a 0 here because that condition fails. So what condition am I looking for? If the contents of this cell here, that tax city state, is equal to Boone, North Carolina. Now we can do this sort of logical test on numerical data, and we can also do this on strings. So this text string of Boone, North Carolina, something can be equal to that. The thing that we want to be mindful of is that we place Boone, North Carolina in this function right here within quotation marks, so that Excel knows that this is going to be a string. So what we have here, kind of getting back to column P, if D2, the contents of D2, equals, type equal sign, and then within quotes, Boone, comma, space, NC, and then quotation marks. Okay, so if the contents of D2 is equal to Boone, North Carolina, then I'm going to put a comma. If that in fact is true, I'm going to give it a 1, comma. If it is false, I'm going to give it a 0, and then I'm going to close parentheses. I'm going to hit enter, and what I see is for row 2, okay, Boone, North Carolina, local is equal to 1. Let's look at row 5 here. Okay, this is Pinehurst, North Carolina. What I should see over here is a 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy it down here to row 5. And what am I seeing in row 5? I'm seeing a 0. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this all the way down. And there I go. Okay. Now there might be other things that that you want to include on this. So what we have here, just to sort of summarize things before we move on to the next video, is that I have added onto the spreadsheet all of the information that was a result of my site analysis. Okay, I've added that to the spreadsheet, and as a reminder, the spreadsheet came from a data table from the shapefile in GIS. So I've entered in this information based on my site analysis, and then given all this information that I have right here, what I've done is actually calculated some new variables from information that exists within this spreadsheet right here. All right, so we can do 2 things with this, and this is going to be the subject of a couple of more videos. One is that we can take this information, we can map it, but in order for us to map it, we need to join this spreadsheet right here to the shape file. All right, we're going to learn how to do that later. But the other thing that I can do is that with this information here and here with my columns I through N, I can slice and dice my data with this sort of thing through the magic of my pivot tables, and I can get pretty interesting sort of distribution of the value of land based on activity, function, structure, site, and ownership. And whether property is owned locally or not locally, or a combination of all of these factors right here. That's what the pivot tables are for. After creating the pivot tables, then of course what we can do is create graphs, right? Bar charts, pie charts, whatever sort of thing that we might want from that. All right, so that will be the subject of a subsequent video.